Hello, and welcome to episode 40 of First Chapter Reads, the podcast where I read the first chapter of an indie book in my Irish brogue and hope that you might just find your next favourite author. You may have noticed you can now see me as well as hear me, and I do apologise for any offence this may cause you. But I've now ventured into the world of BookTube, so if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would encourage you to do so now and help me please our algorithm overlords. Today's book is The Forsaken Planet by Bryan Wilson. Bryan has had a winding road to publishing his debut series, Power of the Stars. But as an avid reader and writer of sci-fi and fantasy since childhood, he hopes, like any good book, that journey has a satisfying ending, one with many more novels for readers to enjoy. Excitingly, the final book in the series, The Dark Element, is releasing the same day this video is going out. So, if you enjoy this chapter, I would suggest checking out the entire series from Bryan. This is chapter 1 from The Forsaken Planet. A gust blew a group of red, yellow, and green leaves across the road where Colton Sampson drove with his windows down. He soaked in the fresh fall breeze as it rustled through his car, enjoying the last bit of warm air before the winter cold rushed into the New England states. Exhausted from a full day of classes, he narrowly beat the rush hour commute home. That is what, in a stupor, he thought over when the cell phone's vibration in his pocket jolted him back into focus. His dash flashed the name of his best friend, Tommy Wilmot. "What's up, man?" he answered. "What's going on? You home yet?" "No, hit a little traffic. People don't know how to drive," Tommy grunted. "I get it. I'm on 95 this morning, and see the guy behind, laughing hysterically while watching something on his stupid tablet." Colton shook his head as he rounded a corner, almost to his house. "I got stuck behind a guy a few minutes ago, holding a line of us up at a green light, so we could get the right selfie to post." Tommy chuckled. What a world. "So what's the deal with tonight?" Colton asked. His friend yawned. "I don't know, but I'm not in the mood for anything crazy." Colton agreed, considering he had to work in the morning. "Maybe a small fire in my backyard," Tommy suggested. Colton's stomach grumbled as he turned into a street. "All right, that sounds good. I'm just pulling in now. Let me eat, shower, and I'll call you." "Will do. Later." Colton pulled into his driveway, shut the engine off, grabbed his books, and walked out into the fall air. He lived with his parents in the suburbs, about an hour from New York City. There were 6 houses in a dead-end street, all surrounded by a long stretch of woods. They lived in a house in the end of the cul-de-sac, the right side of his home facing the deepest stretch of trees. For a small but busy town, they lived in one of the last private and peaceful areas left. He smiled as he stared into the woods where the leaves were all changing colour, one of the many things that made autumn his favourite time of year. Walking into his house, Colton smelled food cooking. He headed straight for the kitchen, where his mom stood over the stove, her clothes and curly hair in disarray. She smiled as he walked in. He grinned when eyeing the roast in the oven. "It'll be ready in a little while," she said. He nodded as his dog Cato came running down the hallway to say hello. The black lab jumped up, placing both paws on his chest. Colton rubbed the dog's head and asked, "What's up, bud? How's your day going?" The dog didn't answer. He only had one thing in his mind: to take Colton to the ground. After wrestling for a couple of minutes, Colton made for the shower. He soaked under the warm water for a long while, dwelling on term papers and projects, about work at the bookstore in the morning, and about a slab of meat and gravy on a plate. When finished, he headed to the kitchen. Sometime during the shower his dad had gotten home, wearing his usual zippered fleece khakis, and he was already sitting and eating beside Colton's mum. "Thanks for waiting," Colton chided as they both chowed down. His dad snorted. "Oh yes, because you'd be the first to do that." Colton made a plate and took the empty seat at the end of the table. As he sat, a familiar weight on his lap, and looked down to see Cato grinning up at him. His mum didn't like the dog begging. He waited for her to look away when she asked his dad about work, and slipped a piece of meat under the table. "Busy," his father answered, running his fingers through his graying hair. "I'm still backed up from taking Joe and Mary to New York the other day." He frowned and looked over to Colton. Speaking of work, have you figured out what you want to do with your life, Colton? That was a favourite question of his. Colton shoved a piece in his mouth and answered in a mumble. Oh, I'll figure it out eventually. His dad grunted. Colton shrugged. He worried about it enough. At that moment, he only wanted to focus on the tender and tasty roast. While he ate, his mum asked about his brother Joe and Joe's wife Mary. So no luck finding them a place at the city, Rob? His dad grunted. Nothing in their price range. As they discussed Joe, Colton finished his food, let Cato lick his plate, and had just risen to put his dish in the sink when his phone rang down the hall. He ran to catch it. What's going on, Tommy? He answered. Not too much. Ace coming over with the boys in a bit. I guess we'll have the fire, unless something else comes out. All right, I'm pretty much ready, so I'll head over in a few. After hanging up, Colton gathered some things before walking down the hall to the living room. His parents sat on the couch, watching television. Cato greeted him with the cotton-filled football in his mouth. Sorry, pup. I'm heading out. I'll see you when I get home, okay? Heading out to find your way in life? Apparently his dad wasn't all that focused on the TV. His mum glanced at her husband and shook her head. Colton grabbed the football and chucked it at his father before saying, I'm going to Tommy's. Be careful, his parents said as he walked out the door. Love you. Love you too. See you later. He stepped outside into a star-filled, cloudless sky. A full moon lit up his yard and street. He walked into the garage and grabbed a few beers out of the fridge there. Tommy lived close, so it was less than 5 minutes before Colton pulled into his friend's driveway. It was a short walk past his colonial-style house into the thick woods and down a 20-foot dirt path to the fire pit. What's going on? Tommy called out as Colton entered the clearing, where a fire was lit and a game played on the radio. What's up, brother? Where's everyone? On their way. Tommy grabbed a beer out of his cooler and held it up in offering, the fire's reflection sparkling in his amber-coloured eyes. Colton refused, showing one of his own. Tommy put the drink back and began picking at a callus on his dark brown hands. Sitting next to his friend, as always, Colton felt small. Tommy was a few inches over 6 foot, the tallest in their group of friends, and with a broad build from working as a carpenter, he was also the strongest. Minutes passed while the two listened to the game and talked amongst themselves. They got into a heated discussion over who the best pitcher in the league was when footsteps approached. Ace Castillo sat to the right of Colton, chiming in. Definitely Perez, Colt. He turned his hazel eyes towards Tommy. Don't let his stubborn moronicness try to tell you differently, Tom. Tommy gave the told you so look. Oh, yes. I'm going to list someone who thinks moronicness is a word, Colton replied. Ace laughed, shaking his head of finger-length brown hair. Charlie Morris, referred to as Morris by the group, sat at the right of Ace. His pale, white skin stood out in contrast to the dark night, and being short and stocky with a chubbier physique, he looked different from the rest of their tall, leaner-built group of friends. Behind Ace and Morris came the final two, T.J. McPhee and Scott Doxson. Always the most put together, T.J. showed up to the fire in a tucked-in button-down and khakis, while Scotty's dirty blonde hair was neatly combed and slicked like he was about to go to the club. Colton was surprised to see T.J. He lived away at a college in Pennsylvania, studying to be a lawyer. Everyone always assumed he would be the most successful in their group of friends. What the hell are you doing home? Colton asked him. T.J. smiled. It's too boring back in the city. Wanted some fun. That caused a chuckle from the entire group, as they believed they lived in one of the more boring towns in the country. No, it's my dad's birthday, T.J. added. I'm taking him out to eat tomorrow. Colton nodded. Scotty took a seat before saying, Oh man, TJ, I forgot to tell you about the fight the other night. TJ's eyebrows shot up. What? Mars grunted. Yeah, Ace wanted to get laid, and we all almost got arrested because of it. Ace frowned. Hey, I did nothing wrong. A cute girl sits next to me and starts talking. I'm not to talk back. It's not my problem if she overly enjoys the conversation. It was when her boyfriend became pissed, Colton noted. Here we go, TJ said in anticipation. Boyfriend comes over with some big douchebag, Ace explained, shaking his head. He asked me if I have a problem, so I point to the girl leaning over in my lap, not knowing she's his girlfriend, say, with this beautiful thing next to me, does it look like I have a problem? Oh no, TJ chuckled. Ace got pushed off the stool, Scotty confirmed, and kicked while I was on the ground, Ace added. Thank goodness for Tommy over here. Before any of these other schleps even moved an inch, Tommy threw one fool over the bar and planted a black eye in the other. Tommy shrugged. He wasn't one for violence, but he also wasn't one to watch a friend get stomped while down on the ground. Nice, Tom, TJ said. So you guys bailed? Yeah, we weren't waiting around for the cops, Morris answered. A couple of hours flew by quickly as they talked and caught up. They hadn't been together like that in a while, and Colton found it pleasant. But even enjoying himself, he couldn't kill his fatigue or stop thinking about the work he had to do in the coming days. He was about to call it a night and catch up on some sleep when Scotty banged the radio and asked, What's wrong with this thing? Everyone stopped to listen as Scotty turned the volume up. The signal kept bouncing in and out. The announcer's voice fluctuated over the static. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Difficulties with the... Not quite sure. Give us a min. Colton quit playing as he thought. The game sucked anyway. They all shrugged it off when Scotty again drew them back. Wait, what are they saying? Crowd seems distracted. Can't see from here, pointing towards the... People are panicked, tumbling over, players running off. The radio died out, and all they heard was static. H remained frozen with beer halfway up to his open mouth. Morris looked just as confused, with one eyebrow raised in an arch. TJ scrolled through his phone, looking for what was happening, and Scotty sat on the ground, slapping the radio. Tommy looked worried, making Colton decide to break the silence. We should get to a TV. Tommy stared at him a moment, lost in thought before he got up and darted towards his house. The rest all followed suit. What the hell is going on? Colton wondered. He stepped out into Tommy's backyard where Tommy's parents stood in the porch in their robes, hugging one another and staring up into the sky. He was about to ask what had happened when he noticed a friend doing the same. He stopped walking and looked up. At first he couldn't tell what was different, but he knew something wasn't right. The nighttime sky appeared more crowded than usual, as if every star in the universe had become visible. And then the stars moved. What started as a few turned into hundreds, then thousands of red, yellow, and orange lights getting closer in the sky. He stared awestruck as they changed from tiny clusters of shapes to separate visible objects. They reached a point he estimated was a little higher than the altitude of a commercial airplane before stopping. They remained scattered in all directions, sitting still and hovering. A minute went by as the aircraft remained unmoving. Colton was just about to say something when, from the corner of his eye, he saw one shoot forward with a speed he wouldn't have thought possible. Two more followed, but the rest stayed in place. As the crafts got closer, he noticed they had a triangular look, and some sort of flame-like insignia on their side. The blue light at the back seemingly propelled them forward, glowing brighter in intensity the faster the craft moved. They maneuvered straight towards where he stood, leveling off at a couple of 100 feet, passing over his head. The only sound he heard was the slight rustling of the wind. A circular object flew out of the ship that had been the first to head toward the surface. The object hovered in midair for a few seconds before dropping out of sight behind the tree line. A moment later an explosion vibrated the ground at Colton's feet. He flinched and threw his hands up as a massive black cloud rose above the trees. What was that? TJ yelled from behind him. A bomb, Colton responded in a numb tone. Where'd it hit? Mars asked. Colton knew. He realized it the second the object dropped straight down. There was only one thing besides woods in that direction. Tommy must have known too, because he turned around and his horrified face stared into Colton's eyes. Colton could barely mutter. My street. That was chapter 1 from The Forsaken Planet. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of First Chapter Reads. I would encourage you to check out this space opera by Bryan, and while you are at it, you could also have a look at my latest release, Cold-Blooded. I put the links in the description area for your convenience. I would as always ask that if you do read any of these indie books, please leave a review. Indie books only get noticed through reviews, and if you find a treasure out there, make sure to share it with the world. If you enjoyed today's reading, I would love to hear from you in the comments, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to Bryan to hear what you thought. Don't forget to subscribe and share as well. I will see you next time. Take care.